Jai Baba,
Ah,
and welcome to our celebration of Padri, Baba's Mandali. Um, I have a little video that I was going to show, and then Karen Talbot will read a bio about Padri, and then we'll open for sharing. Glad everybody's here today.
I was walking down a lonely road, looking for a place to rest. There was no escaping from this ache inside my chest. Then I got down on my knees and begged for mercy, and I raised up my hands, and I knew the answer even as I asked the question of just how much this love demands. And it's everything, everything, nothing less than everything will do. And when everything is burnt, I will take these ashes and offer them up to you. Meher Baba Mahadeva, Mahadeva, Meher Baba Mahadeva, Mahadeva. I was walking down a lonely road, looking for a place to rest. There was no escaping from this ache inside my chest. Then I got down on my knees and begged for mercy, and I raised up my hands, and I knew the answer even as I asked the question of just how much this love demands. And it's everything, everything, nothing less than everything will do. And when everything is burnt, I will take these ashes and offer them up to you. Meher Baba Mahadeva, Mahadeva, Deva, and it's everything, everything, nothing less than everything will do. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. That song was recorded in my living room about 15 years ago on a little tape recorder, if you can believe it. Karen? Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, everyone. I'm going to read a little bit about Padre, and where I've got the information from is the book that Errico Nadel wrote. Well, posthumously, All These Things Take Time, Mister. And he was certainly very, very close to Padre, as was Bob Street, who I'll mention later. Basically, Padre was born November 29th, 1903. He passed on March 13th, 1982. His father was Navroz Driver. His mother was Frani Sorab Irani. His mother was Mera's mother, Daulat. And her brother was Colonel Merwan Irani. Padre was the third of four sons, and his mother was the one who introduced her sister, Mera's mother, to both Babajan and Upasni Maharaj. So Padre was Mera's first cousin. Padre was educated at Pune Camp Government School, English School. From a young age, he was very close friends with Baba's brother Jalarani, and also with his cousin Aspandier, who later became Pendu. His mother, Frani, was spiritually inclined. She persuaded her husband to purchase a flour mill down the street from Hazrat Babajan's seat. At the end of her day, she would spend time with Babajan. She realized the importance of Merwan at the time, Meher Baba, because Babajan would declare his special status. Frani's sister, Mera's mother, was also spiritually inclined. So Daulat, Frani, and Daulat's daughters, Paroja and Mera, would visit Upasni Maharaj in Sikori. In January 1922, after Baba's long stay with Upasni Maharaj, Baba took up residence in a small hut on Ferguson Road in Pune. One day soon after that, Frani sent her son, Faradun, Padre, with a note to Jal's brother Merwan. She wanted him to get there and meet Baba. When Padre came to deliver the note, Baba told him his mother had already been there. So he realized it was simply a ruse to get him to meet Baba. He was smitten by Baba's charm and enchanted by the atmosphere surrounding Baba. Baba encouraged him to visit. At the time, in 1922, Padre was 18 years old. In May, he made a serious written commitment to stay with Baba and remained with him for the rest of his days. A year later, Baba gave him the nickname Padre. He and Pendu were with Baba on Baba's first walk from Ahmednagar to the camp near Arangaon, which was to become Meherabad. Years later, Baba would refer to them as two of the four pillars of Meherabad, the others being Vishnu and Adi K. Irani. Padri lived with Meher Baba at Manzili Mim. He attended to Baba during seclusion and accompanied him on many of his travels, which were very difficult. Padre made the trip to Quetta with Baba in the early 1920s, and they stayed there with Goher and Katie's family. And at the time, Goher and Katie were very young girls. Padre was proficient in several languages. He spoke Gujarati, English, Hindi, Urdu, Marathi, and Farsi. And so he served as a teacher in the Meher Prem ashram. But his actual training was as a machinist and a mechanic. And from the beginning, he was involved in infrastructure and construction at Mehrabad. He saw to the construction and maintenance of the buildings there. He was also an excellent photographer and a homeopathic doctor. He evidently was an avid reader, and when Baba would be away on his travels, Padre would read and learn and use that as being the doctor of homeopathy. During the new life, Padre remained as the manager at Meherabad. By 1960, while most of the other Mandali were with Baba, Padre was left at his post, diligently managing the affairs of Meherabad, though he would be called to Merazad and Guru Prasad occasionally. At the time of Baba's dropping his body, Padre made many of the arrangements at Meherabad and was closely involved in everything that occurred at that time. In the 1970s and early 1980s, Padre totally took care of us when we came to Meherabad and saw to how we were cared for there. He called us raw recruits, loonies, and he called those living at Meherabad the savages. And that's how the Savage Kitchen got its name. He cared for us when we stayed at Meherabad for the 4 days. He lit the dooni, gave us homeopathy medications, as well as giving those to the villagers who trusted him explicitly. Padre was also a trustee of the trust, the Meher Baba Perpetual Charitable Trust, and he was appointed by Meher Baba. On March 13th, 1982, Padre suddenly passed away while sitting on the front veranda of the Meherabad bungalow, dictating a letter to Bob Street. The last words he said were its ending, "Yours sincerely." Padre emphasized obedience to the master and had little patience for ostentatious sentimentality. He was quoted as saying, "Love is for the saints and the musts, not for the likes of us." Padre would say, "When I was young, I tried to understand him, but soon realized the futility of it. His precept became simply obey the master." Baba said of Padre, "Padre is one of the 4 pillars of Meherabad. He worked without any desire. He is service personified. He has rendered great service for the last 25 years. Padre, for instance, has not even the desire to know anything spiritual. All he wants and all he desires is to work for me. Jai Meher Baba."
Beautiful, Karen. Thank you so much.
And again, most of what I read came from Eriko's book, All These Things Take Time, Mister.
Oh boy, they sure do. What a wonderful, wonderful outline of his life, and what an example of service for us and obedience. We hear so much about people that knew how to love Baba, like we did yesterday with Margaret Krask, who just emphasized love for Baba. And then today we hear about Padre who knew about service and obedience. And I think about that because the only thing I can think is to don't worry, be happy is one of the orders from Mary Baba. And I'm not that great at that either, but I keep trying. So anyway, it is important to think about obedience to the master and how important it is in our lives. So I just wonder if anybody else had any thoughts. I unfortunately, Padri passed before I got to India in '85, so I never got to meet him. And I'm just wondering if anyone here has any memories of Padre they'd like to share. Or anything. Okay, Dana? You had your hand up first, Dana. Go ahead.
I could share something, just little tiny memories, just characteristic memory that I remember. We used to sit out on the veranda of the big bungalow, you know, Mandalay Hall bungalow down Mehrabad, when we were there for those 4 days at night and in the afternoon. And I can't remember the whole discussion, but I do remember this fellow was analyzing, I think he was analyzing Begin the Beguine, the meaning of Begin the Beguine or something like that. And the discussion was going on and on. And finally, Padri rapped him on the head with his knuckles and said, "You're trying to understand the ocean with the drop, sir." Which pretty much summed it up, pretty much sums up any attempt to understand Baba. Then I have another memory, which again will take about 2 seconds to tell, but I can't believe I did this. I was in town one day and I didn't have a ride, didn't have a rickshaw or anything back to Mehrabad. And I saw Padri and there he was with his motorcycle. I can't believe I did it. But I asked him for a ride, if I could hitch a ride. He said, "Get on." So I got on the back of his motorcycle and then I thought, oh my God, what do I do with my hands? Do I hold on to the motorcycle? Do I hold on to him? And to this day, I can't remember what I did with my hands. I really can't remember, but he rode me out to Mehrabad and then I got down and that was that. And it may have been during a 6-month period when I was living there, when I was about 30. It seems like it would have taken a little bit of sense of familiarity with him for me to dare to do that. But I just remember that was the highlight, one of the highlights of my life. And I do remember him being a bit sharp and stern about some obedience issues that came up with people staying out there during those 4 days. There was one gal, one of my roommates, who was, I don't know if she was purposefully harassing him, but I'm sure that what was happening was taken as a bit of harassment. She just kept going to him with this, that, and the other, more questions, more things. And it was night. It was time to turn in and to be quiet and everything. And he finally kind of put his foot down and said, you know, enough of that now. Go to bed. I can't remember what it was about, whether it was about health or what. But he did, as Karen said, he treated us all homeopathically. And he treated me actually after that, at the end of that 6 months period that I lived there, I had a chronic health problem that was really troubling me. And he said, he sat me down, he gave me one powder. Then he said, "Now take this back with you. In 40 days from now, take the second powder or the second pills." So I did that and it pretty much took care of the problem. It was remarkable. But he was so focused on you when he was treating you, as anybody knows who's been treated by him. He was 100% focused on the problem, whatever it was, and solving it. Wonderful. Such a beautiful atmosphere in his little clinic room. His clinic room, which was his room, I think, too. Maybe Karen remembers whether his clinic room was the same as his bedroom. I don't quite remember.
Yes, it was.
I think it was. I mean, those people lived so, you know, Spartanly, so simply. And one time I keep thinking of a few more things to tell, but there isn't that much. But one time I remember walking by, this was in later years, I was walking by him and it was at night and I was thinking, oh, Padri doesn't even know who I am anymore. And then I heard out of the darkness, Jai Baba. I was thinking he doesn't even greet me anymore. And he greeted me. It was just such a simple, sweet thing, but he was so pure. He really was amazing. Beautiful human being, unlike anybody. And I said, Padri, how are you? Not that time, some other time I said, how are you, Padri? He said, skin and bones, skin and bones. What do I look like? And he was at that point, skin and bones. I think that's it for what comes to mind off the bat.
Well, if anything else comes off the bat, you let us know. But I can't believe, Dana, to look at you, that you would ask him for a ride on the back of his motorcycle. I'm so impressed now. You've just gone up in my...
Well, you have to be young and stupid and not know what you're doing, not know what you're asking, I think is really what it comes down to.
And look at the memory.
I'm glad to have been that young.
I am glad too. What a memory to create. Just wonderful. And thank you. You know, we were talking about kind of that irascible personality of Margaret Crass, but look at Padre. He was very dry and extremely funny. I love the one about you're trying to see the ocean through the drop, young man, or however he said that. Just an amazing sense of humor.
Trying to contain the ocean with the drop. I think it was along those lines.
Yeah, that's it. So wonderful. Baba just had so many interesting and funny people around him. I can't help but just kind of honor Baba's sense of humor in these people. Thank you. Please come back if you have any more, Dana. Alan, Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Well, when I first met Padre, my picture's not showing here. When I first met Padre, I thought, well, this is my kind of guy. He was not for the fair-hearted. And in those days, to use it in a kind of a colloquial way, I was pretty masculine, and he was very masculine. I think he intimidated about half the women and probably some percentage of the guys as well. He was more like a walnut, hard on the outside and rather soft on the inside. So we got on pretty well right out of the box. I saw the glint in his eye and the mischief he was up to, so I knew he was right up my alley, and he was. I had bugged him a little my first trip in '73 to tell me his story, so to speak, or to tape him. I guess I brought a tape recorder, which seems unbelievable. Those big tape recorders we had with the cassettes, tapes we would shove in there. So finally one day he relented. He said, okay, Mr. He would end everything with Mr. Called every man Mr. I don't know what he called the women. But he had us at the end punctuating the way he said it. And he brought me into his room, which was everything, this little room, not very big. His bedroom, his homeopathic office, and there was really no place to sit. So he says, all right, mister. He's sitting on the bed, pounds the bed. He says, all right, bring out that thing. I'll tell you the story. And then he proceeded to talk for about an hour. I must say his bed was very tight. You know, he made a nice bed, like very military-like. And he proceeded to give me a talk for about an hour. And sadly, I gave it to somebody whose name will not be mentioned, whose ability to return things was between 0 and 0. And it took me a year of badgering, and the tape I got back was a 1975 tape rather than 1973 tape. So God knows where the 73 tape is. But I'm sure the story is give or take a penny, pretty much the same. One of the interesting things was, because he was in charge of Meribah, there was this fellow there on my first trip, and he he was a problem. He was a tall, strong guy, very, very masculine. And he had a big mouth, and I think he was still doing drugs or had been doing drugs. How he got there, I'm not quite sure, but he got there. Well, I know how he got there. We went in a paper taxi from Pune. He and Byron and I thought he was Anne's boyfriend. A little years later, like 40 years later, she told me, no, he was just a guy in the taxi with us. So that was kind of funny. But in any event, somehow he got into a lip with Padri. And I was stunned because I didn't think he could do that or wanted to do that. And he was a tall guy. Padri he had some height, but he wasn't tall. This guy was 6'2". He was an athlete type of guy. And we got into an argument about drugs. And Padri basically told him, if you're going to do drugs, you get out of here. You get the hell out. He was not one to mince words, as you know, if you read Errico's book. And by the way, speaking of Errico, when he became Errico, I knew him as Eric. So it took me a number of years to call him Errico. I knew him back in 69 or 70 when he was just Eric. Apparently I wasn't there, but I've heard the story. One time Padri seemingly, he fainted there at Lower Maribad and appeared he was dying. And somebody said to him, take Baba's name. And he got up and said, that's not the order. The order is to take care of Maribad. He walked away. So that's a typical Padri story. I'm sure Karen will tell the story of the scorpion bite. That was like 4 hours of Padri one night when she got bit by the scorpion, but that's a whole story. In 1980, I had finished law school and taken the bar exam, and then Karen and I came to India in early August, immediately after taking the bar exam. And I greeted Padri. I don't know if it was the day I saw him or sooner after. In any event, we were there for a number of weeks. So finally, in the scheme of things, it was just he and I out there at Lower Maribad. You know, Lower Maribad was different in those days. If you see pictures or videos, if they have videos, I guess they do. You know, occasionally like a Tonga would come by, or a rickshaw, or some bullocks. I mean, you could stand in the middle of the road, and you wouldn't lay down in the middle of the road, that'd be stupid. But you could stand there in the middle of the road, and nothing would happen. Sometimes for 15 minutes. It was amazing. In Lower Maribad wasn't, even after the MPC was put up, wasn't really that busy. You know, it's hard to describe. It's very quiet. I remember getting a tape from Don Muller from his trip in '87, and we played it at our house, and nothing was happening in '87. I mean, it was like somebody would walk by. Anyway, to get back to the issue, I'm just telling you how quiet it was. And Padri and I are out there. I just was there, we're talking. And he said to me, well, mister, now you're a liar, meaning a lawyer. And I said, Kaka, I've always been a liar. Now I'm a lawyer too. Now I want to say that Padri never didn't get the last word. Anyone who knew him knew he got the first word, all the words in between, and definitely the last word. So he looked at me and he pointed that finger. What he would do with that, this finger, this pointing finger, this trigger finger in his right hand, was bent from God knows what. And he would always kind of put it right up into your nose like that, you know. And he squinted his eyes. Anyway, and I said, now I'm a lawyer too. And he looked at me, and pointed a finger. He had nothing. And I waited. I was expecting a good comeback. I was hoping for a good comeback. I would see if I could tap him. It was the program. He had nothing. And he turned around and he walked away about 8-10 feet, maybe 6-8 feet. He turned around, pointed the finger again at me, like that, you know, the bent finger. He kind of crouched down. He was kind of crouchy, like in his carriage, you know, to his spine. So he was crouched down. He still had nothing. He had nothing. He walked away. It was one of the great 3 moments in my life. The other was when I made Hoshang Barucha laugh. Now, that might be worthy of ordinary mukti right there. But I got the last word on Padri, at least in that one moment. And I can't believe I did that. I liked when we would stand out in the nighttime, and he was pretty earthy, I think you could say. He just, shoot a snot rocket, or you just pee right there if it was just guys. He would curse, call all the Westerners loonies. Then he would laugh, though, because you got to kick out of that. And he just was just an example to the men, particularly, of how to do the deal. And I always was impressed the way Ursula Reinhardt, Hamilton, Ursula Reinhardt, she would speak about it with Eric and Nutty too, but she would always say, relative to Padri, now there was a man. And so for the guys, looking at the men Mondoli, there was an example of how to live the life, and the discipline they had, and the humor they had, and the flexibility. My God, can you imagine how flexible these people were? I would change plans by the second. They had no stake or anything like that. So I guess I'm done for the moment, but he was very, very, very big in my heart. And his death was pretty devastating, actually, when it occurred. Great guy. Loved being with him. And I wish I could have one more chat with him. He just cracked. I love his videos. They crack me up. Hey, Bob.
Alan, what happened with the tall guy and the fight? Was it a physical fight between
No, it
them?
wasn't a physical fight. No. They were arguing about drugs, which was not going to happen in Meribah. And it went on for quite a while. It's quite entertaining, actually, I have to say. I don't recall anybody arguing so vociferously with Padri. It seemed like a stupid thing superficially to do. But the guy was very sturdy. He was a big guy, he was strong. So he kept at it. He was red in the face. Now I'm remembering the event right out there at Lower Maribon, and a lot of finger pointing like that. And Padri would have none of it. He was the man towered over him. I mean, Padri was, as he said, a thin guy, but he was tough as nails, and he really got Padri up, whatever you want to call it. He got his Parsi up. I don't know what they call it in India, but I'd never seen Padri so angry and firm, because he didn't feel he was sincere. Baba, he didn't have Baba in his heart, I don't think. But he was there at Meribah, so there was something going on. He didn't stay all that long. He also, when I talk about Mera, he also was in there when we went into Baba's bedroom, Mera, and he lasted about 2 minutes, which allowed me to spend about an hour with now. So anyway, I know Karen's probably thinking, why am I talking about it? Which she always does. Doesn't matter what I say. It's always too long.
Alan, thank you. All right, Diana. Jai Baba.
Jay Baba. I just have three things that I was thinking of sharing. And the first one is that it was my first trip to Mehrabad, and yes, it was the late 70s, and staying over in Mehrabad for those 4 nights. And I remember dinner, the first dinner, and I don't know exactly what room it was where we were given our food, but we were sitting at dinner, and in comes Padri letting us know that we're expected to finish everything that we've put on our plates. And it wasn't we should clear our plates, it's we will clear our plates. I had never heard anything like that before, and all of this was sort of new food, and I didn't know how I felt about it, but I didn't dare not clear the plate. So it was definitely a strong impression. I don't know if it was on that trip or another trip. I went to him with a health concern in his little room, and as I remember, he told me to sit on the cot, which may have been his bed for all I know, and he was on a stool. I don't know for sure that's what how we interacted, but that's how I remember it. And as I remember, he was so attentive. I felt no hesitation in telling him what the problem was. He heard me well. He was respectful, of course, and it was, and he responded very honestly. It was a specific skin condition. He said they didn't have that in India, but he advised me to contact Anna Fry, who lives someplace in Pennsylvania. Some of you may have had some contact with her, and I did. And I don't remember that I followed through with her, but it was an interesting connection. But what I also remember is that as I left his little room, he smacked me on the back. It was probably meant to be a gentle, just, friendly touch, but he was big and strong, and I could have sailed up to the Samadhi on that one. It was just quite strong. And the last thing that I remember is Aduni, and that would have been, of course, in those late 70s, early 80s. And on that trip, there was a particularly troublesome young boy with his mother in Mehrabad. And wouldn't you know it, at Dooney that year, Padri had that little boy light the Dooney. And as troublesome as this boy was, he did what Padri told him to do. So I think Padri may have helped him with lighting the Dooney, but then more importantly, Padri put this boy's head down for darshan right there at the Dooney. There was no getting away from that. He was very forceful, and it was clear what this little boy was meant to do. That impressed me. If I remember something else, I'll bring it up later. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Diana, that's great. Thank you so much. You all are creating the sense of Padri for me. I know I had a friend that was very disruptive and got to India and came up against Padri, who banned him from the area. And it seemed that he was the final, he was the final say for a lot of people that came there troubled and unable to move in any kind of acceptable way. That Padre would be the man that they would have to visit and see, and he would be the one that would say, until you pull that together, stay away. So the idea about the drugs and so forth, but yeah, I could see where Baba called him a pillar. Fred, Jai Baba, can we see your face? Yeah. Jai Baba.
Hey, Barbara, everybody. And back in 1971, my first visit to India, I got down at the bus station, and then I took a rickshaw right to Mehrabad. And on the porch at Mandalay Hall in Mehrabad was Padri. And the rickshaw driver let me off, and I went up to Padri. And then he said, "Who are you?" And I told him, I said, "I just arrived from the USA." And then I said to him, "Padri, I really don't feel I'm worthy to be here. En route here, I stopped in Hong Kong and I visited some bar girls and eventually spent the night with them. I don't know why I'm here. I feel that I shouldn't be here." He stopped and looked at me and he said, "Quit your mental gymnastics. Do you think he would have you here if he didn't want you here? Now you go right up to the Samadhi, put your head down on Baba's tomb and tell him what happened. You think you would be here otherwise? No, you would not be. So get that out of your head. Quit your mental gymnastics, you loony. and go up there. And so it was remarkable that Padri was there for me to support me there, because I really felt I shouldn't been there. That was September of 1971. So 18 trips later, and getting to know Padri and his homeopathic treatments for me. And one time, Mohammed the Must, was in the Mandalay Hall. He kept in that other room, the big hall, had his bed in there. Padre's office was outside, just at the entrance. And I looked in and I had my eyes closed and I was saying to myself, oh, Mohammed, give me a glimpse of the fifth plane. Give me a glimpse of the fifth plane. Next thing Mohammed did, I was thinking this, he said, Jal, Jal, Jal. So I was a little bit shook up by his remarks to me. And then I went to Padri and I said, Padri, what does that mean? Jal, Jal. He said, get the hell out of here. And so anyway, that's some of my experiences with Padri, but he was a man's man. He reminded me of, like, I don't know if you've seen the Magnificent Seven and James Colburn. He reminded me of that kind of a character who was so cool and nonchalant, but very strong. And I remember seeing him on the motorcycle driving up, and he looked like something like Steve McQueen out of, out of a movie or something. He was an amazing man, and I was so fortunate to have crossed the paths with him. Jai Baba.
Oh, Fred, such great stories. Thank you so much. Amazing how we could just bare our hearts to people we hadn't met before, and how they were so receptive and just mirrored Baba back to us. Oh, God. The other thing that I was thinking of, he just the photos and seeing him painting at that opening of that video, he was just such an elegant looking man. Just you brought up how he was kind of cool, but he just had this elegance about him that I've always admired. And I don't know what that's about, but anyway. Rosalie, good morning and Jai Baba. You're still muted, darling.
Perhaps I remember too much about Padre. And I was very disappointed there was no childhood picture of, so maybe he didn't have a childhood. I'm thinking maybe. It's interesting because I love to see those young pictures of the Mandalay. Yeah. I met him. I wouldn't say I met him. I came across him. We weren't introduced. And my first time in India in 76. And I guess my first memory is him smoking a cigarette and being very gruff. It was like this gruff, growling voice. And what was beautiful was there was no electric lighting. So, we had these lanterns that come down from Archie. And then it was just so beautiful out at Lower Maribod because you could see all the stars. And then you could see this little Padri's lit cigarette. And sort of got used to, that's how he is. He's kind of gruff. And yeah, he proved gruff to me. Anyway, I encountered him later. I remember one time a woman, she used one of we used to eat, that was 1976, there was no Pilgrim Center. There was a place that it was a room that we'd eat at. And she had picked some wildflowers and put stones in water, and it was on the table, and he came like, he came like, descended, how dare you? And she was like, she was frozen at the table. Anyway, she didn't do that again. I I appreciated, well, I'll say one thing about authority. Mani Irani said something that I utterly relate to. Baba gives us the highest authority. He gives us the authority to love him. So there's really no higher authority than that. But Padri was, I knew he knew homeopathy. I didn't even know homeopathy, but I knew he knew it. And I remember asking him, because before I went to India, you know, you check to see what you need, any shots, and they gave me pills, anti-malaria. So I asked him about it. Oh no, I wanted a homeopathic remedy, and he says, I can't help you. You need to get off that pill. So I got off the pill, and I had treatment from him. And he was bullseye. He was a bullseye homeopath. And I celebrated Christmas there at Meher Colony. And we let Kali, the cook, who had cooked for Baba, that's when you could only say at Mehrabad, you could come Monday and you would leave Friday, and you had to get a place in town. Well, what a proposition. I was so grateful for Meher Colony. It was just, for me, it was divine being there. So Christmas Eve came, and we let Kali cook anything she wanted for Chris. It was Christmas. Well, we're sort of sorry about it later, but you know, because usually I'd be real selective. What I ate in India, you know, I'd eat the same thing if it worked, you know. And someone from Australia had homemade fruit cake, and I got to eat the fruit cake, and I ate too much because no one liked it but me. And Janet Podmore, then was her name, she had a flask of alcohol. It was like potent, and I was not used to drinking at all, but I took a swig, and in the middle of the night, it all came up, the whole Christmas repast. And I went, oh man, I'm in India and now I'm sick. So I rickshawed out to see Padri. And he was there. It's his bed, it's his everything room. And I came in, and I said, and he was like sitting, and he was a little bit hunched over at his kind of desk, and he had his little envelopes, homeopathic stuff. And I says, Padre, I says, you know, I ate all this different stuff, but then it all came up in the middle of the night, and he went. I could only see, he didn't even look at me. I could see his rimless glasses, the edge of it. And he says, you overate. Overeating is one of the worst sins against a human body. And then he proceeded to pull out an envelope. I was stunned, you know, I thought, overate, because all my life people had said, eat some more, you're too thin, eat some more. Anyway, so I went on my way about that. And, you know, we had times, he was uncanny as far as Muhammad the Must. He knew if Muhammad's mood was changing, and it was really uncanny me, almost like animal instinct, you know. And I was leaving India that time, and I was with a person, if anyone knows her, Ellen Book, a very mild, sweet person. And she had brought chocolate for Muhammad, and we were going to stop and give the chocolate and then rickshaw and get our, you know, we were going out of India together. And she approached Muhammad. I was right with her, and she said, Muhammad, I brought you chocolate. And he started growling and running at us. running at her. I mean, I was like, and Padri was there, like, you know, it was like he materialized, or he was like, you know, and he took her out of the room, and Muhammad wasn't upset with me, you know. I mean, I followed them, but anyway, so I mean, I have to say he was a very gruff person, but he had that real soft side, like Alan was saying, that core. But I got more of the maybe the Colonel Irani side of Padri, you know, that. And also Bob Street, I'm surprised there aren't many men coming to the celebration. I mean, I'm floored, you know. Yeah, anyway, because they'd always say he's such a man's man, you know. Well, apparently not. But anyway, the beauty of his, I mean, even when I would butt heads with him, and I certainly did, but you know, he had a purity about him. And I could honestly say I didn't like him. I just didn't like the man. You know, I didn't like, you know, it's like bucking up against authority of Mehrabad. I mean, of course, Baba's the authority of Mehrabad and everywhere, but, you know, he did, his say was very strong there. Yeah. Anyway, I'll say no more, but I am grateful for meeting him. And he was one of the pillars of Mehrabad, you know, and the only one I missed was Vishnu. Yeah. So Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, Rosalie. Thank you, honey. And I just wonder if there's anybody else that wants to take a moment to share. Otherwise, I'm going to call on Karen because she had one or two little things that she wanted to read for us. Make sure you're unmuted, Karen.
Why? So I would like to read something that speaks to what people have said. This is from On Sacred Ground, and it was written by Heather, and I'll read most of it. Faradun driver, nicknamed Padre by Meher Baba, was one of the earliest Mandali, having met Baba in Pune in 1922. After Baba dropped his physical form, Padre continued to serve him at Mehrabad until his own death in 1982. Padre didn't speak much, but when he did, people listened. His distinctive way of speaking was precise and elegant, even his abuses. He could be straightforward or stern, or very witty or profound. Regarding straightforward, I recall his habit of training some of us by pounding on the window at 5:30 a.m., shouting chai, the word for tea, very loudly, which made one sit bolt upright out of deep sleep. He could also be very funny. Young visitors were loonies, a short form for lunatics, and young people who lived at Mehrabad year-round were savages. Padre's views could sometimes surprise you. I remember sitting next to him on a bench on the main bungalow veranda one day in the late 1970s. A troublesome and very strange pilgrim was walking by, and I muttered, "Now, there goes a real loony." Padre immediately replied sternly, "You cannot set foot in Mehrabad without lifetimes of service and longing." And I want to stop for a minute and just share a story. In 1977, I was at Mehrabad, and Padre was in fact giving us a wonderful tour of Mehrabad. And I remember distinctly nothing about the tour, but I remember him saying, "All of you here have seen Meher Baba." He said, "You would not be here if you had not seen him. You may have been a ticket taker in France, but you had a glimpse of him, and that's why you've come." So I was very touched by that. Back to Heather. Padri was a keen walker with his long strides and love for the countryside. When he wasn't riding his bicycle or his cherished, carefully maintained motorcycle, he often wandered by foot far and wide. He checked on the nearby village and farms, and always on Meribad, from the progress of its ants to the growing height of its trees to its buildings young and old. One day, when walking with us, Padri gestured towards the old Dharamshala and its front veranda, which faces in the direction of Baba's Samadhi. Perhaps we were asking him about the early days at Lower Meribad, when the Mandali spent a lot of time in that building. It was a mess quarters, and then the bungalow, and later the Meher Charitable Dispensary and Hospital, and so on. Standing outside the building, Padre told us the following recollection from 1925 or 1926. One day, Baba was sitting in a chair, relaxed, head back, with his legs and arms stretched out. Two of the Mandali were massaging his feet, and another two trimming his fingernails. Off to the side, one of the Irani Mandali, Kaikushru Afsari, later called Rao Sahib, was reading out to Baba a Persian ghazal by Jalal al-Din Rumi. As many of you know, Rumi was a great poet and a perfect master. Padre was there at the time and recalled that listening to the ghazal, Baba's chest began to turn reddish. Gradually, the red climbed up his neck to his face and onwards to his eyes. Padre then recounted that the white of Baba's eyes slowly turned red and rolled back into his head so that one could hardly see his pupils. In his life with the master, Padre went on, he had never seen Baba so intoxicated, either before, since, and that Baba seemed to be far, far removed from the world they knew. Heather Nadell for Avatar Meher Baba Trust, 15th September 2016. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Karen, I wonder if there's anything that you can recall or any story you'd like to recount.
I have two stories. I probably have told them already, but I'll tell them again. The first time I was in India and at the Dooney, I wasn't thinking, and I might not have even been aware, but I had not taken off my shoes. And Padre came up to me and said and explained to me that I had not taken off my shoes and that I should go up to the Samadhi and ask for his forgiveness. I was terrified, and I did exactly that. The other story that I have to share is that as Alan had mentioned, I was stung by a scorpion, and this was in 1980. It was coming back from Merazad. I had an open purse. I had a purse that you could just put things in and out. And evidently the scorpion had gone inside the purse. And when I went to get money out, I guess to pay for our driver, the scorpion stung me on one of my fingers. And Padre took wonderful care. He gave me homeopathic remedies laced with vodka. And I spent hours walking up and down the veranda, literally doubled over in pain. And I think it was Rosalie who mentioned Ellen Book, who was a nurse. And Ellen Book was there at the time. And Ellen was so helpful. She walked back and forth with me. And then every so often we'd go to see Padre. Well, I think he said I'd be better in the morning. I don't know. So I went back to see him in the morning and I said, Padre, I'm still having some pain. It wasn't like it had been the night before. It was subdued, but it's still, my hand hurt. And I remember he slapped my hand and said, whatever is your karma to my request for how much longer would this hurt. So those are my two stories that I remember. And we were indeed so fortunate to know Padre, to know all these Mandali. And yeah, there's some wonderful videos and DVDs that we have so that we can listen to them and hear their princely, kingly words. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Great stories. Whatever is your karma. Yeah, thank you. I'm having a backache, so I'm relating right now. Miss Dana, Jai Baba.
Just two more short, very short things. I just remembered the first time I ever met Padri. He materialized somehow out of Mehrabad, and I took a walk. He was showing me Mehrabad and by myself. It was 1972. And in those days, that's what the Mandali would do. They'd just take you one at a time around because there were so few of us. And so he pointed to the house that Ted and Janet used to live in. They weren't in it yet because they weren't Ted and Janet yet. And he pointed to, I guess it was called Pilgrim Resting Room number 1, I think. Anyway, he pointed to it. He said, oh, first of all, he said, I'm Padri. And I said, I know you are. He said, how do you know? I said, I've seen you in the movies. He said, oh. He said, have you met John Crapper? I said, yes, we've been introduced, pointing to that house where the bathroom was. He said, shit house. I said, yes, I got it, or something. Or anyway, I acknowledged it, but I wasn't thrown off by it. And I could tell he sort of liked it, that it didn't throw me. And then he continued to show me around Mehrabad. That was my first meeting with Padri. The last contact I ever had with Padri, I remembered it because of Diana's story. I was walking up the hill to be in a play for Mira's birthday. And I had a big part in the play and I was quite nervous. And I was walking up, I think, was I in costume yet? I might've been in the costume, I can't remember. But I was walking up the hill and I felt this whack on my back. And I turned and saw Padri's back as he passed me. And that whack on the back probably gave me the strength to perform that part, I think. And that was my last contact with him. When it was time to leave that time, I couldn't find him. So I gave a proxy hug to Alan, who I did find. But that was the last contact I ever had with him. And it was near the end of his life. It was just a few months before he died that time. But I remember just one thing that Joe Harmon, some of you knew Joe Harmon from Atlanta, used to say, describing Padri. He said, Padri reminded me of a general commanding his troops on the battlefield. And so speaking of the man's man, that image sort of stayed with me.
What was your part in that play? What was your part?
Shakuntala.
Oh, wow. I saw that play. Yeah.
That was a high point in my life, certainly. For Mira's birthday was wonderful. So yeah, just Padri was such an exquisite character. And that book that you read from is such a beautiful book. The description of that contact between Ted and Padri, teaching Ted how to look at all the angles of the ground, the groundwater, how it would drain and all. There's a chapter in the book. It's one of the first chapters in the book, I think, where it's a beautiful description of how he brings things out in other people so that you learn how to make, the engineering process. Anyway, I won't go on anymore, but I just remembered those few things more. He was a huge influence in all of our lives, I think, directly and indirectly. Jai Baba, Jai Baba. That book is a treasure.
Thank you, Dana.
Bob Street used to say that Padri would give him cartoons. I don't know if I ever saw the cartoons, but he had a whole bunch of cartoons that Padri would bring him. And I'm so disappointed. I mean, what happened to Bob Street? I mean, I would have loved to hear what he'd have to say. Yeah. Anyone know what happened to Bob Street? He's in India.
You know, I did hear something. I thought he was in the States right now, but I can't be sure.
I mean, I actually heard that he had like a stroke. I mean, that's the only thing I caught, but
Yeah, I don't know for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, how fortunate though. Yeah, I was treated by Bob Street when I went in '85, so I missed Padre, but I think Padre taught Bob Street a lot about homeopathy as well. Is that not so?
He was good. Bob Street was a good homeopath.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he got
Oh,
me better.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Some are not good. Believe me, I've had those that don't know what they're doing. Yeah.
well,
But
it was
he,
nice to have his to have Padre's student treat me. It was very
yeah.
effective.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. No, I still get benefit from, my times with Bob Street, So it was kind of like contact with Padre, because Padre was, he was a bullseye homeopath, just really, that's how it was.
Was.
And these things take time. He probably was into it for a long time.
Yeah. Well, I wondered, is there anybody else that has anything? Karen, did you have another piece that you wanted to read? I couldn't remember. Let me ask you to unmute.
I have a good ending piece, but I went in the other room to ask Alan if about Bob Street. So I don't know if in the interim anyone knew, but he is in India and doing well.
Great.
So
Thank you.
Thank you.
okay, the last thing I'm going to read is something that Bob Aarons sent out. And what Bob Aarons wrote is, today is the anniversary of Padre's passing in 1982. This was sent out a few years ago. Padre was one of Meher Baba's earliest disciples. Baba called him one of the 4 pillars of Mehrabad. Padre, his birth name was Faridun Navrojji Driver, was in charge of Mehrabad during Baba's last years and was a gruff, wise, and loving presence for pilgrims who journeyed there in the 1970s and early 80s. Bob Street moved to India and has lived at Mehrabad since the mid-1970s, and that's from Bob Aaron. And now this is from Bob Street. Sincerely yours, first-hand account of Padre's passing. In 1980, we thought Padre was going to die. He had been generally healthy, although he smoked some and had occasional bouts of bronchitis. One day he had stabbing severe chest pain. Thinking he was having a heart attack, he asked me to get him the appropriate homeopathic medicine, which he then took. Padre was a homeopathic doctor, and Bob learned the art from him. And I guess Bob Aarons put that in parentheses. People around Padre were saying, "Take Baba's name, take Baba's name." Padre gruffly responded in Gujarati, "Let it go, let it go." It turned out that the pain Padre experienced was due to a left-sided pneumonia. He was taken to a hospital in Pune, where he stayed for over 2 weeks. When he was better, he returned to Mehrabad. Seeing him, Heather said, "Oh, Padre, we thought you were going to Baba that day." Padre replied, "Well, I went to the frontier and something must have gone wrong because I've come back. Well, what else? Just a little more suffering, that's all." Fast forward to 1982. I had tea with Padre daily for 7 years. We would usually sit on the veranda outside his room and talk about different topics, including homeopathy. At that time, Padre wanted to obtain some homeopathic medicine from a manufacturer in Germany. The company had just made a deal with a distributor in India, so they had stopped direct sales to individuals living in India. This product, so Padri wanted the medicine directly. Since it was bottled in Germany, the product had been canceled in India. So Padri said to Bob Street, let's write Don Stevens. He had worldwide business connections. Have him contact the company and convince them to send it to us. So Padri and I started working on a letter to Don. Once the draft was done, I would type it up and Padri would sign it. A few days before the conversation on the night of March 9th, there had been an alignment of all the planets. Padri had been anticipating this for about 2 years and discussed the predictions associated with this astronomical phenomenon. That night, he took me along with Alan, Heather, and Eric outside and pointed out the various planets and stars. He said, well, the firing squad is lining up. On March 12th, Padri was at the Dooney and officiated as usual. The next day was a Merazad day, and most people from Mehrabad had gone there, but I stayed back with Padri. We were sitting outside his room. Padri relaxed in his chair with his feet up on the windowsill and me on a bench. I was reading back the draft of the letter to Don and making notes as Padri suggested changes. I was looking down at the draft and said, how do you want to close the letter? Padri replied, sincerely yours. I said, okay, do you want me to read the letter back to you one more time before I type it? Padri didn't respond, so I looked up at him. His face was very pink, and a vein in the middle of his forehead was distended. He didn't appear tense or in pain. His eyes were open, but he wasn't responding. Thinking he might be having a stroke, I ran to get some homeopathic medicine for him and gave it to him within a minute. However, he still didn't respond, and I had a strong feeling at this point that he was going. There was a great feeling of energy present around him, and Padri appeared very peaceful. I leaned over to his ear and said, Meher Baba. And immediately his head gracefully went down and he was gone. It was very natural and relaxed, like Padri, like opening a door and walking into the next room. The atmosphere at Mehrabad was filled with Baba's presence that entire day. His body was placed in the Rahuri cabin and his burial was planned for the following day. When I looked at his corpse, it didn't look like Padri. It was as if some air had been let out. Later, Mani came and went into the Rahuri cabin to view Padri's body. When she came out, she said, no one home here. I have an image in my mind that describes Padri's passing. Padri loved motorcycles and his favorite brand was BMW. I imagine Padri on a big BMW on a road never ridden, accelerating and free, merged with an exhilarating peace. Bob Street, Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Karen, thank you so much for bringing so much
Pictures.
precious material to us
I don't
today.
know, can you see them?
Yeah, let me spotlight you. Hold on. Just
Okay.
one second. There we go.
Padri on his motorcycle at Mehrabad, 1975.
Hold it up just a bit more.
Okay.
That's it. There it is.
Padri on his motorcycle, 1975. Photo by David Fenster. And on the bottom, the stone marker on Padri's grave at Lower Mehrabad, And then I think there's another one here. With his great picture. Pandu and Padri at, there you go, at Kushru quarters.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. One more time.
1973,
Yeah.
photographed by Ralph Jackson. There we go. There it is.
Wow. Look at that. He is such a
Old
listener.
friends. Old
Yeah.
friends.
And
Jay
he's
Baba. That's
so
it.
intent on hearing what is being said. It's beautiful. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay, Rosalie.
I have a question. I know a lot of the Mandali had orders how they would be cremated or whatever. What about Erich? What happened to Erich? Was he cremated or just buried? I mean, I'm surprised that he was not cremated, Padre. It's interesting. Yeah. Does anyone know because I know some of them, certainly Mara was just to be buried but Mani was cremated. Yeah, I guess no one knows.
No, I guess not.
Rosalie, I'll respond. It's
Okay.
Judy.
Judy.
Just getting here. So Baba's orders, as I recall, were that the men would all be buried. And in general, that's the case at Mehrabad, that all of the men, most of the men were buried. Chanji passed in 44 up in Kashmir, and in his, off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly, I think it was his bedding roll that was put across. He and Masaji are both buried across the road at the spot that Baba said should be and now is the memorial tower. But so Chanji, I think it's his bedding roll, but Masaji's body is in that grave.
Give the other name for Masaji. Who is that?
That's Masaji was the cook. He was married to Pila Masi, who was Shireen Mai's sister, his younger sister. So their names throughout Baba history are from Baba's point of view of maternal uncle and maternal aunt.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Shireen Mai's. Because of Pila Masi was Shireen Mai's mother. Whoops, what happened? I hit something wrong. Okay.
There you are.
So the bin and Erich is definitely buried. Actually, I arrived at Mehrabad on the 7th of October. Anyway, Erich had just passed in 2001. He passed, of course, on the 31st of August. But there was still the pile of dirt over his grave. I remember arriving that year because they had not yet put the little platform on over his grave, which was what they did to each of the men's graves. The women's graves, on the other hand, Baba was very specific with, and he, in his trust deed, it's laid out which women should be, would be allowed to be buried at Mehrabad, and in exactly which order they would reside next to Baba's tomb. And And for those that were passed away earlier, they're great, like Elizabeth, and Norina has a very large grave and so forth. Anyway, they're off to the side, but the ones that are immediately near, on either side of Mara and Monty's tombs, are all cremated, and that was at Baba's order.
Yeah.
For Mara, he definitely said that she should be buried, and he gave permission for Monty to be buried, which and cremation for any of those that were Parsis, and many or perhaps most of them were, burial is more preferable than cremation. Cremation was not something, as I understand it, that the Parsi tradition it feels is appropriate after death. Of course,
was that Monty's choice to be cremated, or what?
I'm getting to that. So, of course, the Zoroastrian tradition had the Tower of Silence in throughout their history. Mani, out of deference to the unique position that Mara holds in this advent of Mayor Baba as the beloved's beloved, Mani chose to be cremated, which went against tradition and so forth, but it was in deference to the uniqueness of Mara's position with Bob as his beloved, that she is the only woman who is buried in that close, the first circle out after at near Baba's Samadhi. Not only that, but we all, go up, and the general sense is that there's Mara's larger shrine and Mani's larger shrine, and then the other 4 or 5 on either side that are much smaller. But Mani specifically left her wishes that her shrine be smaller than Mara's. And it's, I forget the exact dimensions, but it's approximately 75%. It's 3/4 as big, I believe, or 2/3 as big as Mara's. But Mani figured it out how it would appear balanced, appear equal, but it's not. And Mani chose that for her love for Mara, and really because of her special place. So
Ansari passed on Dooney Day. Was she cremated? Do you know?
I do know. I was there. I took care of her the last several months of her life in the kitchen there. And
I'm sorry, who are you speaking about now?
Mansari. She
Okay.
was about Mansari passed around just after 7, right as morning Arti was happening on the 12th of January in 97. And her actually, I and Dolly Dastur prepared her body, washed it, dressed it in the traditional Parsi manner. And then it was brought, of course, to Baba's Samadhi. And she had her final darshan there, and then her body was brought down the hill. And
The same day, right? Dooney Day. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
same day. And I think, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember if she was brought to Mandalay Hall at Lower Maribod. I'm thinking not. Because she passed right at as Archie was being said, then many people came and kind of said their farewells at Upper Maribod before she left. I think maybe we brought her body from the Samadhi over to the Mandap, and people, some people said goodbye there. But anyway, and then there was a procession of taking the body down the hill, as I recall, and maybe I'm wrong. We went straight to the cremation ground, and she was cremated that day, and then ashes collected the following one. That's my best memory of.
Thank you, Judy. Listen,
Yeah.
do you have any further sharing about Padri that you'd like to share, Judy?
Unfortunately, I didn't meet him in person. For
Okay.
me, but I have one or two small comments. And that is that when I first came as a hopeful resident to be, a savage to be, Dr. Ann shared with me how Monty had emphasized to her when she arrived that it wasn't, we can't assume that the Lord of the universe will find work for us. And so I heard that lesson loud and clear. And I remember one day, Dr. Ann came back from having met with Monty, and she said, Monty has told me to give you work. And I felt so grateful that the Lord of the universe had seen fit to give me work. And she gave me 2 jobs to begin with. And one was to clean Padri's room, which is what we called it, or his office. That was the homeopathic dispensary to the present day. Padri was no longer there, but that's where all of our medicines for homeopathy at Maribod were kept, and so forth. And it was I felt so blessed to be able to even take the dust off the shelves and arrange things and so forth. And the other job was to take care of Mohammed. And Anne told me, he will teach you Marathi. He will teach you Marathi, because one of the things of taking care of him was to give him his medicine. And pill in Marathi is goli. And so I would, ask him if he, the goli was in it. And he would sit and he'd look at the goli, and or pani, I'd hand him the glass of water to take it with. Pani. Anyway, so he would repeat the same words over and over, which I'm no great Marathi speaker, just to say the very least, but at any rate. So both of, but Padri's office, I feel a deep heart connection, because it was working there that I felt Baba had they were really menial jobs in a way, but they were so precious because they were connected with Mayor Baba. So that's my very brief and distant and heartfelt Padri connection.
Beautiful. Beautiful, Judy. Thank you for sharing it.
Sure.
Well, why don't we all have oh, Betty? Sorry, go ahead, Betty.
I just wanted to take note that Jacko Caraco, who's now in the Marana community up at Mariposa, also learned from Padre. He and Bob, my impression, were buddies in under Padre's tutelage, and Jacko still practices in that community. He's very he's well respected as an acupuncturist and homeopath up there at Marana. So yeah, I'm sorry we didn't think to call him, but well, maybe we could get him to talk later. I'll do that. I'll call him and see what he has to say. Yeah.
All right.
If you want
That's
a good
wonderful.
talk- If you want a good talk on Padre, ask Peter Nordine.
Yes, we did. We invited Peter, but he and Debbie were kind of just recuperating from their Thanksgiving, and he had some other work that he's kind of been tasked with in the Baba community that he got back to. So, all right, let's just take a moment of silence and gratitude for all these wonderful souls that Baba has allowed us to speak of and know. Jai Baba. Jai Baba. Thank you, everyone. Karen, thank you for all your help with this, and certainly everyone that shared and everyone that listened. We're grateful to Baba bringing us together always. So if you want to unmute, Avatar, Meher Baba,
Baba ki
Jai.
jai.
Avatar,
Avatar,
Meher
Meher
Baba,
Baba
Jai.
ki
Avatar,
Avatar,
Meher
Meher
Baba
Baba,
ki
Jai.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Ruthie.
Yeah, thank you.
Fred.
Thank you for the men who spoke about the man's man. Good to hear. Jai
Thanks,
Baba.
everyone.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Karen. Jai Baba.
Thank you, Jai Baba.
Ready,
Thank
Jay Baba.
Lovely time of
thank
sharing.
you.
Thanks all. Jai Baba.
Thank you.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Baba. Yeah. How lucky we are. How lucky we are. All right.
Thanks,
Well,
Ruthie.
yeah, a pleasure.
Thank you, ladies, for doing this. Thank you so much.
I'll just
So glad you were here, Dana.
Ralph Jackson is here. Ralph took that picture of Padre and he just made a comment. He's been shy.
Out a microphone. I forgot I had it.
You're so funny.
Yeah, I'm texting. I forgot I had the microphone. I'm sorry. Jai Baba. Yeah,
Jai Baba. Betty remembered.
that was
Here's the
Right.
picture.
get together. Yeah, yeah. The photo is at the trust office there. I think right outside where Monty's little office was, where her desk was, and Padre would come. Usually, it seems to me it was a particular day of the week that Hindu would go to town to the trust office, and it was a set thing. He would go visit and meet and have conversation with Adi. It was a thing they did, at a set time at a particular day of the week. I don't know. It was like maybe Monday or Tuesday, but I don't know. It may have been Thursday. I forget. And of course, Padri would be in and out at times on his motorcycle. And that was just an occasion when they were there to Padre and Pinda were together, and I was hanging with my camera and got some photos of them. Yeah, that's where that particular picture is, as I recall.
Was there any
And
particular
I don't know
time-
the day. Huh?
I was
It was
just
probably
gonna,
1975,
yeah.
74, 75, something like
No, it's the one on the motorcycle we're talking about now, Karen. Well, was there any particular
that.
story?
The motorcycle was David Finster's picture, if I'm not
Oh, I'm
mistaken.
sorry. I've got it
Yeah.
backwards. Karen, you were right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think I do have photos of Padre on his motorcycle too, but I think that one was David's. Yeah.
Ralph, was there any particular interaction you had with Padre that stands out in your mind?
Yeah, I don't know. Nothing with Padre ever seemed remarkable.
Wow.
In my mind, it was, but it could be, you know,
I hear you.
somehow it just was like, how does Jesus say the word of God is like the wind whisking across the grass, you know? There it is, the wind. That's the word of God. And that's kind of how it was with being around Padre. It was remarkable, but hard to describe. Very romantic to me. I did have the great privilege of being an early riser and I remember I went to India straight out of the army from Germany, and I flew straight to India, and I'd get up and go wandering around Mehrabad in the wee hours. And on one occasion, I was up and I went around to the back veranda of the Mandali Hall of that big building, you know, and there I saw a little light glowing in a window. And I went and there was Padre sitting at a table, and that was his little kitchen. And he saw me and he told me to had me come in. And he read poems too. He was having tea, and he served me a delicious mug of tea in a tin cup, and he had prepared that tea over a little, you know, wick stove, kerosene wick stove, the EFAR wick stove, and he was reading, I don't know which poet, and he read aloud some poems, and I remember he said, you know, I have stiffness, I'm old, and he says I do this thing. He says I foment my legs, and he'd get a towel hot around that teapot and take that warm towel and wrap his leg and massages the calves and shins and knees of his legs, his thin, very thin legs, and with that towel, and he'd say, "This helps me get through the day." You know, that was something he did, was warm his legs up, get the circulation going. Yeah. And he would finish and I'd go on my way. And then in later years, I went to the kitchen as I was accustomed. I did it every morning that when I was there, and Ted Judson had come and he was in the kitchen with Padre. That was a change, but the three of us had tea like that. But I didn't go very often after that. But I did a few times, and I enjoyed the three of us together. And he and Ted would talk shop about plans were in the making for the Pilgrim Center. So they talked about a lot of things. Yeah. another occasion, because I was taking pictures, Padre took interest in my picture taking, and he had a camera of Rolleiflex. Now, maybe you guys remember how there are only three of us here now, I think. No, I see three pictures. He had that camera. Now, I'm not sure how Padre came by that camera. It may have been that Upasni Maharaj gave him that camera. But for certain, it was the camera he used to go to that hut where Baba and Upasni Maharaj met for the last time that they ever met, in a little hut. And Sarosh drove his car, and a lot of people piled in. Padre was one of the last people to pile in the car, squeeze in there with his camera. And he took those pictures of Baba and Padre, which we're all familiar with those photographs. And one day he had me, he says, why don't you take this camera? Do you have any roll film for it? I did. So he said, take this camera and go take some pictures. So I did. I went up the hill and I took some pictures of Mansari in the tomb and this and that. I felt really self-conscious about handling that camera. I was afraid I'd drop it. I took it back to Padre and I gave it to him. He says, would you like to have this camera? I said, Padre, no, it's your camera. And that's how I'll always treasure it, is in your possession. So I don't know if he really intuited that I wouldn't take it or what, but that sort of tickled punched my butt when he did ask me if I wanted the camera to keep it. Yeah.
So cool.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Baba.
Oh, Ralph, thank you so much. So
At
glad
the moment, yeah, at the moment, yeah. Padre was just such a presence at Maribot. I remember when Kakaba died, Padre came up the hill, went in the tomb, and he came out. He met with Mansari, and the word had gotten down to Padre from Mansari. Kakabad's family came to her and informed her Kakabad had died, and then Padre made all the arrangements for Kakabad was cremated. That was the first time I'd ever witnessed a cremation. Such an immense fire, bundle of wood. And there wasn't much wood, in the area. It's hard to come by wood. And that fire just went up and take a lot to consume a body, really a lot of fire. But it went very well, yeah. Everyone said prayers, sang songs, and there was quite a lot of people were there.
What year was that, Ralph?
I don't remember that. On that occasion, when Kakabad died, I think would have been 74 or 75. More than likely.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Well,
Lovely pictures you painted, Ralph. It's just love. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So glad you found your microphone.
Baba helped me with those. They don't. When you have such good subjects, it's hard to go wrong.
Ralph was wondering when Kaikoba died. January 20th, 1976 at Maribot.
Yeah.
There you
He was
go.
asking about Padre too. When did Padre pass?
I sent him that. Padre
okay.
died March 13th, 1982.
82.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like January 26th, right on the right on the toe of Amartya.
I'll be right. Mhm.
Is that what you said, Karen?
Yeah, January
26th?
20th, 1976, Mehrabad,
20th,
India.
20th. Yeah.
And he was born on January 12th, 1891.
Ah,
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. This is delicious. Oh, what an
we had a
interesting
wonderful time.
character. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks to Ralph for pitching in at the end.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ralph.
Betty.
Great stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jai Baba,
Jai
everyone.
Baba. Jai Baba. You can go. Larry had it. He
Jai
was saying, come on, Ruthie. Go have some tea with Larry. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, everybody.
Yeah, Baba.